So I'm going to mount this door panel using 4 bolts and no drilling into the door of the van. Okay, so part of the process of doing my build, I've redone this window like 2 times now. So the first time I did it, I did a kerf bend, tried doing kerf bend around here, and I had it like going in and out, and I thought, wow, that's really going to be complicated. And so then I thought, well, let me just make it straight. And then when we finished the garage, I noticed that we have a lot of space back here, right here. So I wanted to fill that in with some kind of storage. So I'm going to put it on the door. And then, so what I did is I want to make this base come out like 4.5 inches, but I want to also continue it up so that it intersects with this window so I can put my shade on there. So basically, because I want this to be flush, I've clamped this straight edge just to hold it in place, and then I wanted to see how much it was from here, from this piece of plywood that's framing my window. So how much from here to that ruler. So it takes a stiff ruler to do that. So, and then I went up on top and I measured the distance up top. And so now I've cut my pieces here, and I'm going to take the old ones off and we're going to see how this fits. So you can see here where this is the original piece, and this is where I was trying to kind of closely follow the contour of this part of the door, but it's a little curved. So now I'll show you the difference. Okay, so here it is much further out. I think I'm going to trim it down a little more, because I wanted, I mean, if I followed this path straight up, then yeah, that's correct, but I actually want it to kind of bend in a little bit and meet up here. So what I did is I just clamped my straight edge here and up to there, and then I took a pencil and then just drew following the straight edge down, and then I'll cut that on my table saw. Okay, so that's pretty close. So I cut it down, and then I trimmed this top piece because it was sticking out about 1/2 inch, but that's pretty close to what I want. So it's going to go from here straight across and up to here, and then I'll have to fill in right there. Okay, so we got this all painted here. It's attached to my my window frame that I put that piece of wood, plywood, behind it to use as my backer for when you cinch the window together. And then this is just pocket hole screwed into that plywood, and so that's a good strong connection. So for my panel, I'm just using French Cleats. So there's 2 holes here in the door that fit these bolts just fine. And you just reach back through here and tighten it up with a wrench. And this is a pretty strong mount. And so on the back of my panel, so here's my panel, I have the opposite side of the French Cleat. And when I put it on the door, it's really simple. So I pre-drilled my holes into the window frame area, and they go into this plywood, and this plywood is screwed to this plywood, and this plywood is held in place by glue and by the window frame. And then up top here I just have a big piece of plywood that's just kind of sitting in there loose, and I'll put my upper baskets into that, and that will pull the 2 together and sandwich on this lip, and so that'll keep the top basket in place. So basically the only thing I really have connected to the van is these 4 bolts. So when I put it in place, I just have to get the other end of the cleat onto the van, onto the back side of this cleat. And so now that it's sitting here, I can move it back and forth. I can adjust it to where I need it. And now I'm just going to screw in. And since this is 1/2-inch plywood, it'll bend. And that holds it there. And then into these spots here, I'm just using a smaller screw, and I'm going right into the cleat attached to the van. And hold it up against the van door. So that's fully mounted. It's very sturdy. It's not going to go anywhere. For the edges, I scribed. So I put a piece of wood up here and then just scribed this curve. And I just got it fairly close. It doesn't have to be perfect. And did the same on this end. And because of the way these doors are, I had intended to put a side to side on here, but the doors are actually a little bit different in size. And so I wound up going inside on this one. But yeah, that's and these are attached to this plywood, and so that that whole back door, if I need to get in here, it's the same on this side. I just take off the shade, take off this frame, take off the top. These boxes are just held on with 4 screws, and then I can remove these, so I can take the whole door apart in about 5 minutes. So for these boxes that are going to mount here, again, I'm using the French Cleat system. And so I have a cleat that comes here, and it's going to drop down inside there and get it squared up right. It'll sit down in there, and that gives you a nice angle there. And then for the other side, I have a reverse one, and I'm going to have another cleat on the box itself come up like that, and the two will sandwich. And that'll prevent the box from coming off. So now I have 4 screws going into the upper cleat. So I have 2 holes here and 2 on the other side. So to put this up, I start with the bottom cleat already attached. I just slide it up and then maneuver this so that it's in between my boards here. And now I'll attach those 2 screws on each side. There, now that's totally attached. It's pretty strong. You can see inside, this is my top cleat. It's engaging with these cleats here. The bottom cleat is engaging with this cleat, which is attached to the wall. These are attached to the wall, and so that prevents it from coming off. Now if I yanked on this really hard, because it's 1/2-inch plywood, it would probably tear out. But for light storage, it's pretty good, and I can still reach in here and open the door if I need to. And then my bottom box is similar. On this one I have a cleat that is double-edged, so it has one on each side, so my bottom cleat will go here and the top cleat will go there, just because it was a smaller box. It's the same idea. I have the lower cleat already attached. The upper cleat will go up here once it's in place, and then the two will pinch and hold it on there. And there's the lower box attached. We have some lids that are getting painted right now. And this curve down here is a kerf cut. So it's just plywood, and you use the kerf of your saw to take out small sections of it, but not all the way through. So here's my table saw. This is the 1/2" plywood. So I'm just going to do a real small test fit, because I need to make it this way and then curve it around. So it'll be curved like this arch here. This will be the curve. There's online calculators where you can figure out how many cuts you have to make, so it takes into account the width of your blade, called the kerf, and then how many cuts you have to make in order to bend it. So like I'm going to bend this 90 degrees, and so basically it's a circumference of a circle. So if I did like a 2-inch circle, how long is the outside edge, and a 1/2" shorter circle, how long is the inside edge? And then you just take out material until those two numbers match up. So first thing to do is set my blade saw height. So like I said, the grain on this is running side to side, so I'm going to cut this way across the grain. And I need to lower my blade because it's too high. So I want it to come into this final layer, probably about halfway through that final layer right here. I want it to come halfway through this layer, so I need to move the tooth of this blade down. I think right there, that looks pretty good. The other thing too is that's kind of tricky with longer plywood is keeping the surface down on the saw as you're going across it, because you need the cuts to be even, and sometimes they bow a little bit, and so you just got to keep constant downward pressure on it. So here's my sample piece. I cut out 7 grooves spaced 7/32 apart. This one's a little narrow because I just kind of eyeballed it, and you can see it goes almost all the way through the plywood except for a very small amount. And you can see the different height here. It's kind of hard to, because the plywood is flexing when it's going through, it's hard to keep it flat the whole way. But basically what's going to happen is you're just going to kind of twist it like that until these all close up, and that'll give you a nice curved surface for your plywood. So I'll fill each one of these grooves with glue, and then just clamp it tight like that till all those are closed. And you can hear a little bit of cracking. I'd say try it on your sample piece. If you don't get any lifting of the fibers, then that's probably a pretty good depth. If you hear like cracking or anything like that, significant cracking, then you probably got to go a little deeper. Okay, so this one I've done just 4 cuts instead of 7, and so what that's going to give me is a 45-degree angle, and I did it in 2 spots. I wet this down, go slow here to and so what you could do is, if you wanted something for a display panel, you could have like this go to the roof and this go to the side of the van, and then you would have that to put in panels, so it would sit like that. So this would go into the side, this would go into the top, and you'd have this angled down to where you could look at an instrument panel. Just an idea. I'm not going to do this, but just playing around with it. And wetting it really does help, because when I first started pushing these together, I could hear it crack. So I just sprayed water in there and let it drip all the way through, and then sprayed water on this side, and it wasn't even 2 minutes and it's already. So now I would just maybe clamp this and let this dry, and it'll unspring a little bit, and then you can put glue in there and then tighten it back up. So here's another one where I cut 4, and then I can just bend them in like a square. Just some ideas. So here's a demonstration of the strength of it. So this is 3/4 inch plywood that was kerfed all the way up pretty close and then glued. And I'm about 220 pounds, and you can see that that's holding me just fine. So plenty strong, as long as it's glued. So for this top basket, I made this angled, so this is like a 7-degree angle right here. And then I just kind of rounded it off to just give it a nicer look. To secure it, I have these supports here. They're just plywood, and then a screw going in here to there, and then it's actually resting on the top right there, so that it has some downward strength. And then I have 2 screws, one here, and inside that upper cavity there's insulation in there, but I also put a piece of plywood that's just resting in there. And so I ran my pocket hole screw all the way through, and it grabbed the other piece and then pulled it in, so it's like cinching these two together, and it's pretty strong. So now I need to, when I cut this here, I wasn't paying attention to how the shade mounts, so the shade will utilize this corner here when you're screwing it in, and so because I don't have that corner, I can't actually screw it in. So what I've done is I've made a frame that's going to go over top of this, and then the shade will mount to that frame. Okay, so I have my frame up. Now it's time to put up the shade. So the way these shades work is this is actually clamped like down like that, and so you have to push on these little tabs there, and you can only see them when you move the shade away from the edge. And then there's 2 holes there and 2 holes on the bottom. Okay, so there's the final put together for this side. I have lids that are painted and they're drying. I mounted it, the shade part up. If you look through the window, you can see that it has like a silver reflective surface on the shade, so that's good.